Coming up, we are discussing which D-backs were named Silver Slugger finalists and our favorite storylines entering the World Series. And of course, we got to give a prediction as well, all on today's Locked On Diamondbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online, where the game starts. I'm Millard Thomas, host of this wonderful podcast, of course. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer, so please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there, you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. If you want to see more content by me, just follow me on Twitter at CreatorThomas24 for my personal account, or look up Locked On Diamondbacks, both Twitter, Instagram for the podcast handle. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. Would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free and available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. On today's podcast, as I mentioned, we're going to be doing World Series predictions, talk about our favorite narratives and storylines entering the World Series. But first, I want to talk about a little Silver Slugger because we talked about the D-backs and their Gold Glove finalists, I think last week on the podcast. But I also saw the Silver Slugger finalists were announced, and the D-backs had a couple of people named. And let's first look at what should be the first position we look at. Let me see. I think the first position we're going to look at is going to be first base because once again, Christian Walker of our Arizona Diamondbacks had a fantastic season, of course, with his near 40 home runs. And because of it, he was named a Silver Slugger finalist. But unlike the Gold Glove finalists, where there's only 3 players to every position, it varies a little bit more when it comes to the Silver Slugger. And there's 5 candidates in total, including Silver Slugger. For these finalists, Christian Walker is, of course, one of them, but it is a loaded field for Christian Walker. He was by far and away the best finalist among first basemen when it came to the Gold Glove. But when you look at the field for first baseman for the Silver Slugger, I mean, the last few years has been really dominated by 2 guys. One of them is a former D-back and Paul Goldschmidt. The other guy is Freddie Freeman, and both of them are going to be right in the mix, and one of them is more than likely going to win the Silver Slugger award because, I mean, Paul Goldschmidt's probably going to win MVP, so he's going to be a hot candidate to win it. Freddie Freeman's going to finish top 3 in MVP voting most likely. And then you look at the other candidates for first base. I mean, Pete Alonso, he's going to be getting some MVP votes. Matt Olson is a freaking stud as well. So I love Christian Walker. I definitely think he deserves to be a finalist because he was one of the league leaders in home runs. He did have a fantastic power season. He's the definition of a slugger. But when I look at the rest of the field, he's just not as good as the other guys. Now, if we're talking about straight glove work, yeah, Christian Walker, he deserves to win the Gold Glove. But if we're talking about the Silver Slugger Award, he deserves to be a finalist, but I can't see him finishing any higher than 3rd at best on the Silver Slugger Award for first baseman. But how about second baseman? Because this is what shocked me because, of course, if I'm looking at second baseman, there's only one D-back that's going to be a finalist, and that is Ketel Marte. And I'm telling you, I'm shocked to see Ketel Marte as a Silver Slugger finalist because if you go back and listen to yesterday's podcast, the finale of Power Ranking, our top 10 most disappointing D-backs, you know who checked in at number 1 on that list? Ketel Marte. And now you're telling me he was a Silver Slugger? I love Ketel Marte, one of my favorite D-backs, but he was not a Silver Slugger this season. This was not the normal Ketel Marte. Even if it was 99 games of Ketel Marte from 2021, if it was that version of him, then yeah, he doesn't only deserve to be a finalist. Damn it, he might deserve to win the award. But what I saw from Marte this season wasn't good enough. And I think it's really an indictment on how weak the second base field is for the Silver Slugger Award because you look at the other candidates. Jeff McNeil, great batting, great contact player, Great guy with a high batting average, 326 average, like great hitter, but is he a slugger? I think there's a difference. Derek Jeter was a great hitter, but Derek Jeter wasn't a slugger. I think that's more of a Jeff McNeil. Look at Jake Cronenworth, solid guy. Is he a slugger? Colton Wong is on this list. Brendan Rodgers, like both of those guys. Wong only had 15 home runs. I think Cronenworth, he had like probably a decent amount. Like none of these guys are really sluggers. I think the National League second base is really weak. I think the field is weak. And if Ketel Marte has a bounce back season, then he's will immediately solidify himself again as the best second baseman in the National League. And even coming off the disappointing season he just had, I still think he's the best second baseman in baseball. Because if you're asking me if I had to start a team, do I want Jeff McNeil, Jake Cronenworth, Colton Wong, or Brendan Rodgers? I'm taking Ketel Marte all day, every day. And listen, I like Jake Cronenworth. He's a good player. He's now a two-time All-Star. Jeff McNeil's also pretty good as well. But none of them have the ceiling and the skill set of a Ketel Marte. So Ketel Marte, I guess, is a finalist. He has a chance to win this award. Spiritually, I would even give it to Ketel Marte as the Locked On Diamondbacks guy just because I know how disappointing of a season he had. But looking at the rest of the field, I mean, he might just win it by default and based off name value. So those were the only two D-backs players to be named finalists for the Silver Slugger Award. But I want to bring up one name that should have been named a Silver Slugger finalist because they have a category called utility here. And the utility guys who were named Silver Sluggers were Brandon Drury, Tommy Edman, Thairo Estrada, Jeff McNeil, and Chris Taylor. And I got to ask, who's more of a slugger utility guy than freaking Dalton Varsho with his 27 home runs, near 20 stolen bases? Like, Varsho is the slugger that deserves to be a finalist. We knew he was a finalist for the utility Gold Glove and right field, and he should have been a finalist for the utility Silver Slugger Award with the amount of power he displayed this season. I thought it was a little bit of feeling kind of shameful that Major League Baseball didn't recognize Dalton Varsho is a Silver Slugger because I look at the rest of this list like Tommy Edman. I don't think he's a slugger. He's like a speedster. He's not even a guy that hits for a high average. Typically, he steals a lot of bases. Estrada, 14 home run guy, another speedster. Like, these are guys who are like quality utility guys, but none of them are really sluggers. Like, I might give it to Brandon Drury based off this season. I like Chris Taylor in the past, but I don't think he even had that great of a season. Like, I'm comparing Dalton Varsho to like the Chris Taylors of this year or the Thairo Estradas. Like, yeah. Give me Dalton Varsho all day, every day as my Silver Slugger Award winner. And then one final thing I want to talk about before we wrap up segment number one is Jordan Lawler, in case you didn't see, in case you're not following the Arizona Fall League, because admittedly, I'm not a big Fall League guy. There's some interesting prospects. Jordan Lawler's out there. Got Cooper Hummel, a major league player out there. There's some really interesting guys and names in the Arizona Fall League, and I do potentially want to go to a game, but one of the reasons I may not go to a game any longer this year is because I won't be able to see our future superstar, Jordan Lawler, because unfortunately in the Arizona Fall League, he got plunked in the shoulder and fractured his scapula, patella. I don't know what it was. He hurt his shoulder. That's all you need to know. He tore something off his shoulder. Now he's going to be out 6 to 8 weeks, and it's the same shoulder he tore his labrum with last time. So tough injury luck for Jordan Lawler his first couple of years. But even with that being said, he's put up phenomenal numbers in the minor leagues. He's put up what in like high A, like a 300 plus average, around 280 average as he got elevated. He looked comfortable so far in his first full professional season. Like, Jordan Lawler is going to be a stud. This shoulder injury is going to keep him out a few weeks. He should be ready for the start of next season. And if Jordan Lawler starts next season in Double-A, maybe gets moved to Triple-A by All-Star break or before that, like, it's possible we see Jordan Lawler like how we saw Corbin Carroll this past season when he gets that September call-up and is able to play the last 3 weeks of the season. I don't know if that's entirely possible. I think that's best case scenario if he continues to rocket through the system because he's looked phenomenal, but it might be more likely that in 2024, maybe he gets the Alec Thomas treatment and he first month of the season, minor leagues, and then he gets called up that second month. Maybe that's more likely in 2024. But if we do see him in 2023, I think it would be that Corbin Carroll situation where we see him at the end of the year. But he needs to start off pretty quickly, pretty hot right away, and then get elevated beyond that to AAA. So we'll see with Jordan Lawler, but what he's shown so far in his young professional career has been nothing short of exactly what you want from a top 3 pick. And the injuries are concerning, but it's not like They're not like injuries where it's like soft tissue where you feel like he's injury prone. Like getting plunked in the shoulder, there's nothing that you could do about that. Just bad breaking. Just hope it has no lingering effects because what we've seen, like I said, he's been a stud so far. So I'm really excited about Jordan Lawler and the future of him in Arizona. And if you want to bet on Jordan Lawler making his debut with the D-backs next season, you need to head to betonline.net because it's your number one source. 1 second. Hold on, I actually can't start that ad read yet because I got to put my little overlay on for those who are on the YouTube channel. I didn't mention follow Locked On Diamondbacks on YouTube as well because right now, before I do the Bet Online ad read, I always got to add my little overlay for our YouTube audience. So let me start from the top because if you want to bet on Jordan Lawler making his debut with the D-backs next season, you need to head to betonline.net because it's your number one source for betting football and the start of the new basketball season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis of every game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right. Let me put my lower third back on and let's get back into the podcast. I want to do some storylines entering this World Series because I think there's some really fun storylines and narratives to watch and some, fun storylines and narratives that are going to come out this World Series depending on which team wins it also. The first storyline, I think this is the most fun storyline of what I'm watching for. Will this World Series, if the Phillies win the World Series, and let's just say Bryce Harper is named World Series MVP or at least has a really good series, does that end the Bryce Harper versus Mike Trout debate? Because look, people are going to say, no. There is no debate. Mike Trout's by far and away the best player. But once again, I got to bring up, I don't like to do this. I agree. Mike Trout's one of the best regular season players of all time, but I can't put him on that legend status. Mike Trout will be a Hall of Famer, but is he a legend? I don't think so because he doesn't have a lasting legacy. When you're old, decrepit, sitting on that rocking chair on your front porch, grandchild on your lap, and you're telling them about the old days of baseball and the Mookie Betts you used to love watching and the Miguel Cabreras of the world and the Verlanders and the Kershaw. And then your grandchild asks you, Grandpa or Grandma, who was your favorite player to watch? Who was the best player of your generation? You say, son, it was Mike Trout. And then your grandchild says, oh, really? Why? What was your favorite moment by Mike Trout? And then as a grandfather or grandma, you look at your grandchild and you say, well, that July game against Kansas City Royals where he robbed Andrew Benintendi at the wall, it was phenomenal. Like the issue with Mike Trout and his legacy and being a legend, he has no moments, no memorable moments. He's been in the league over a decade. His greatest moments are robbing people at the wall in a meaningless regular season game. Great highlights. But now, even just this past season, even Bryce Harper doesn't win the World Series. He made moments that people are going to remember. Philly fans are going to remember forever. Some Philly fans, I was driving back from California last weekend after celebrating my birthday. I was listening to baseball podcasts on my 6-hour drive from home. I was listening to a lot of Phillies random podcasts, and I heard Phillies fans say that was the biggest home run in Phillies postseason history. That Bryce Harper home run in whatever game 5 it was against the Padres to send them to the World Series. They think that's the biggest home run in their franchise history. What moment does Mike Trout have like that? Plus, you got Bryce Harper. He's got the accolades as well. Bryce Harper's put in work in his career. He's got the 2 MVPs. He's also Rookie of the Year. He's got stats. Mike Trout might have better stats, but Bryce Harper's got phenomenal stats as well. And their numbers aren't totally different. Mike Trout's definitely been a better player throughout his career, but a 303 average for Trout, 280 average for Harper, 1,000 OPS for Trout, 913 OPS for Harper. The home runs are not terribly different. About 70 more home runs for Trout in about, 25 more games. So definitely a better pace there. But the extra base percentage is very close, both around 10, 11%. Both have the exact same walk percentage. Both are basically the same strikeout percentage. Both are within less than 1 percentage point of home run percentage. Like a lot of them, these two players have very similar stats. Of course, Mike Trout has also like 3 MVPs compared to Bryce Harper's 2. Like regular season wise, you'll definitely give the edge to Trout over Harper. And you're not like, it's not like a crazy edge, but you definitely feel Trout over Harper. But you have to take postseason into account. And with Harper going off and actually carrying his team, like it makes you recalibrate. Like, yeah, in the regular season, I might want Trout over Harper, but over the course of a whole season, including playoffs, then give me Harper and give me that infectious energy he also has. You can't tell me the intangibles of Harper and the way he plays and the fire that he plays with doesn't also affect his teammates. Mike Trout plays with passion too, but I don't think it's that infectious passion like a Bryce Harper. And knowing Bryce Harper is now a proven playoff performer, unlike a Mike Trout who's just unproven on the biggest stage. And again, it's not all Mike Trout's fault. He's been on a terrible team with no pitching. I do think it's his fault that he continues to stay there and not leave. But I mean, we're getting the biggest bag in baseball. I guess it's okay. But if Bryce Harper wins this World Series and wins World Series MVP too, I think it ends the debate. Mike Trout versus Bryce Harper, because both of them, let me get this right, both of them have pretty similar regular season stats, but only one of them are going to have postseason stats, and that's going to be Bryce Harper with moments, with legacy status plays. Like it's got to be Bryce Harper over Mike Trout, even if you think Mike Trout's a better regular season player. The playoffs do matter. Competition does matter in sports. It matters in baseball. And Bryce Harper came through on the biggest stage. Another storyline I'm watching will be, this is not second, I'm not doing a power ranking. Another storyline, it just, will Dusty Baker finally get a World Series? Because I saw something crazy where Dusty Baker's 9th all-time in managerial wins, and the 8 guys ahead of him all are in the Hall of Fame and have a World Series on their resume. And Dusty Baker has done it with 5 different teams he's been the manager of. He's been to the World Series a couple times now, and it just, he hasn't been able to get over the hump. He's in his 70s. He's someone that just feels like everyone loves. He's definitely a very good manager. He definitely knows what he's doing. So it's not like just some old geezer that just on his final ride and being carried by a great franchise. Like, no, Dusty Baker pushes the right buttons. He maximizes his players. Like, I don't think it's just a coincidence that a player like Carlos Correa leaves and Jeremy Pena is empowered at shortstop and is able to win ALCS MVP for his team. I don't think it's a surprise that someone like Lance McCullers, who was their number 1 starter last year with Justin Verlander out, comes back off injury and is okay being the number 3 starter. Or even a Justin Verlander, who was the number 1 starter but missed all of last season. He comes back and reclaims that number 1 spot in the rotation, and there's no qualms about how the rotation should be ordered or stacked up. There's no hierarchy and ego mania, people clashing with their egos over how the hierarchy of the rotation should be established. Like, Dusty Baker has his team's personalities in check. He knows how to employ and utilize his players correctly. He knows how to put them in correct situations. Like, there's also not a lot of times you're like, man, Dusty Baker just didn't deploy the right guy from the bullpen. He didn't use his best bullpen option there. Like, we were complaining about the Yankees. I always felt like they didn't deploy their best bullpen lineup. But for the Astros, like, when it's time to get those final few outs or come up in a big moment, like, Dusty Baker's going to his go-to guys, and he just has a great feel for the game. I think it's all the years of experience he has. So if Dusty Baker could get a ring this World Series, great for his resume, great for, I mean, he's already in the Hall of Fame, but again, legacy status, Dusty Baker is on the short list of the greatest managers of all time with the World Series champion. Like, we already know he's one of the greatest managers, but he needs it to solidify himself, just like a Bryce Harper or even a Mike Trout, if he was ever able to make it to the postseason and win. Now, we are going to talk about a few more storylines. But first, I want to say, once again, just thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. Make your second listen today, the Locked On Sports Today podcast. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, you need to check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. Go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. All right. Let's get back to the podcast and let's get through a couple more narratives before I give you my prediction. And another narrative, this might be the second biggest narrative of what I'm watching for, is like a Bryce Harper, for Justin Verlander, will he go down as the best pitcher of this generation? Because I feel like, I don't know, over the last like 10 years, I feel like there's a three-headed monster for the best pitcher of the generation. I feel like it's Verlander, I feel like it's Clayton Kershaw, and I feel like it's Max Scherzer. And I always felt like Scherzer and Kershaw were a little bit more ahead than Justin Verlander. But Verlander has now, this is going to be, he's been to multiple World Series now. And Verlander has been a guy that's been really good through the first 3 rounds of the playoffs. But one thing Verlander has not been good in that maybe isn't talked about enough is the World Series, because this will be Justin Verlander's 5th World Series, 2 with Detroit, 3 with Houston. And in the World Series, he's 0-6 with a 5.68 ERA and 7 starts. And that's very Clayton Kershaw-esque. Like, Kershaw is just not good at all in the postseason. At least Verlander has like an ALCS MVP under his belt. He's been good in other playoff runs, at least getting up to the World Series. It just, once he got in the World Series, he wasn't good. Kershaw, you can look at division series, you can look at championship series where he wasn't good. For Max Scherzer, he's a guy who, of course, gets a little bit worse on the postseason as well, but still a very good pitcher. Very good on the big stage, but all 3 of them have major accolades. All 3 of them have Cy Youngs. Even a guy like Kershaw is an MVP, but you could realistically make the case for any one of them. I think a lot of people would say consensus Kershaw is the best one of the 3, but if Verlander wins another Cy Young award this year, likely to get his 3rd this season with a Rookie of the Year, Verlander also has an MVP on his belt. Now, if he gets, I don't know, World Series MVP or just a World Series, like, I think now we have to talk about Verlander as the pitcher of this generation, because like a Kershaw, I view him like a Mike Trout, because Kershaw, again, the best regular season pitcher among the guys I just mentioned, but I do not trust him in the playoffs, and that's because he has a proven track record of not being trustworthy in the playoffs. The only time he came through in the playoffs was during the 2020 pandemic season when there was like no fans in the stadium. That's the only time Kershaw's ever looked good in the playoffs. So I think that is very sketch, and I don't hold a lot of water with that World Series ring, at least for Kershaw. I don't take it away from the Dodgers franchise or team, but when it comes to Clayton Kershaw, I'm like, yeah, that ring might be a little phony, friend. So Justin Verlander, if he wins a World Series this year and looks good during it, not just you go out there game 1, you give up 6 earned runs, but your team is able to win games 2 through 5. No, if Verlander goes out there in game 1 and looks like the Cy Young Award winner we saw this year and wins the World Series with Houston, yeah, Verlander is that dude and is the best pitcher of this generation. How about this one? This one's kind of fun. Are the Astros a dynasty? I think we really have to talk about that, because I've talked about a lot on this podcast about how the Astros, since 2017, their cheating year, have been at least in the championship series every single season since then, with now their 4th World Series appearance in the last 6 years. Just think about that. But is that a dynasty, just getting to 4-6? I don't believe it is. I believe for this Astros run era to be considered a dynasty, I think they have to win another one. I don't even think it has to be this year, because I don't think the run is even over. Like, I look at the American League next year. Is there anyone you're taking over the Astros right now? If you had to go to betonline.net and place a 2023 World Series bet, Houston Astros or the field, I'm taking the Astros probably over the whole field, because they're going to have a stacked rotation once again. They're going to have a stacked lineup once again. And the Astros might not even win it this year, but they might be able to be in position to win it again next season. So they're able to get a second World Series ring under their belt pretty much within the next 3 seasons. Then yeah, this is a dynasty going back to 2017. And not all dynasties are like 4 to 5 year windows. Like, I think the Patriots, a lot of people have talked about, maybe had 2 dynasties when you had that first run with your defense leading it, when you won 3 rings, where Brady was good, but it was more of a secondary piece, like how Russell Wilson was to the beast mode Seahawks. That was kind of an early dynasty, the first decade with the Patriots. And then they went through a long drought. And then you could say that second run with the Patriots was another dynasty. So maybe for the Houston Astros, maybe they have a prolonged little 7-8 year dynasty here, where from 2017 to who knows 2024, they make it to not 7 World Series. They make it to like 5 World Series or 2 rings. If that happens, if the Astros get to like 5 World Series and win 2 chips in like a 7-8 year period, then yeah, that's the definition of a dynasty there. And then the final storyline narrative that I'm watching is, if the Phillies win, will it lead to more teams spending money? Because we've seen the last few off seasons, growing up as a kid, I couldn't wait for the offseason for baseball and the winter meetings because it felt like a free agent bonanza, especially that Albert Pujols year with the CJ Wilsons. Like, usually baseball free agency is supposed to be a great time because superstars actually hit the market in baseball. And usually I felt like in the past growing up as a kid, maybe it'd be kind of slow, in the beginning. But once the winter meetings hit, it was a free agent frenzy, a bonanza. But now the last 2, 3, 4 years, like the offseason is so slow, and you will have those major signings still, but it's like once every 3 weeks, once a month. The whole offseason is just dragged out. Stars will wait. Like if you go back to Bryce Harper's free agency, I think him and Manny Machado were like unsigned until like a month before spring training. Like the best players in your sport should not be unsigned free agents until the very last month of the offseason. Like you look at basketball, literally as soon as free agency opens, 70% of the free agents get signed in basketball. But in baseball, 70% of the free agents are still unsigned after 80% of the offseason is already over, which is just absolutely insane. So I hope if the Phillies win, it leads to teams getting more active early in free agency, getting more aggressive and spending money, because the Phillies showed go out there and sign beast players. If you get Bryce Harpers and the Castellanos and you already have your homegrown talent with the Reese Hoskins, and you're able to acquire talent with Zach Wheeler, like go out there and acquire as much talent as possible, because it's a lot easier to win games when you have stars on your team. And that's what the Phillies showed this year. One guy, Bryce Harper. I mean, of course, it's been a whole bunch of players for the Phillies, but that Bryce Harper signing is paying off in a big way, and he's looking like he's earning every part of that contract. And even if you go to the other team that NLCS, the Padres, like they've been spending a lot of money recently as well. Manny Machado was also the big guy signed during that free agency period, and he looked like he was worth every penny as well. So paying your stars actually works out for your team, and I'm glad the Phillies are in the World Series to prove it. But we could even have the same argument with the Padres as well. So hopefully this whole championship series to World Series proves that spending money does work in baseball. But now, before we wrap up today, I do want to give a little World Series prediction, go on record, because my World Series prediction, I would love for the Phillies to win. I want it to be a Red October. I want Bryce Harper to be goated. Everyone thinks I'm an anti-Mike Trout guy, and seeing Bryce Harper win and rooting for that would just be a little bit more fun to my anti-Trout villain origin story. But that's what my heart wants. But what does my head say? My head says Astros in 6, because this team is too dominant. They haven't lost a postseason game yet. They got the deepest rotation. I mean, after Wheeler and Aaron Nola, like if one of those guys gets hurt, like I don't love this Phillies rotation. I trust those two guys, but you got McCullers, you got Verlander, you got Urquhart, you got Valdez, you got Christian Javier. They go deep. They got bullpen guys. You look at their lineup. Their rookies out here winning ALCS MVP. You still got Altuve, got Jordan Alvarez. Like the lineups, I think are going to clash. The Phillies offense, like the Astros, if they can slow down that Phillies offense and cool them off a little bit, they got the pitching and the horses to do it, and an offense that could overcome the games that Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola aren't pitching. So for that reason, I'm going with the Astros, because let's say a Zach Wheeler does give up, 4 or 5 earned runs in his first start. Like now you got to trust your other rotation members, if you're the Phillies, to come through for you in a big moment against this Astros team. I don't know about that. Meanwhile, the Astros have like 4 or 5 number one starting pitchers. I'm going with Astros in 6 over the Phillies. Everyone's going to be mad, but I root for chaos. I love how much everyone hates the Astros. I'm on the Astros bandwagon for this World Series, and I hope they win it, because I'm all about rooting for chaos, and that will lead to the most fun narratives in my mind. Now, that's it for this edition, the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. It's Friday, so come back next week. More Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. Go back and catch up on any pods you might have missed this week. Earlier this week, we talked with Silly Baseball, breaking down the World Series as well. So go check out that podcast. Come back next week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and of course, deuces.